Suspicion begins with a single clue. I was sitting in my bedroom on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, putting away my husband's freshly laundered dress shirts, when my entire world collapsed. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 58 years old. And I'm about to tell you a story about trust, betrayal, and the moment I discovered that everything I believed about my marriage was a lie. It started with a drawer. Such a simple thing, really. I was organizing Robert's sock drawer, my husband of 28 years, when I noticed something tucked underneath a pair of black socks. A receipt. Hotel Belmont Restaurant. $287.50. 2 entrees. An expensive bottle of wine I'd never heard of. Now, here's the thing. Robert and I hadn't been to Hotel Belmont. In fact, we hadn't been on a date to any nice restaurant in months. My husband had been telling me we needed to save money. That business was tight. That we should eat at home more often. But that wasn't even the worst part. Paper clipped to that receipt was a small note. Handwritten. Just 4 words that would haunt me for weeks. Room 614. Thursday 3 p.m. Heartbeat louder. My hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down on the edge of our bed. The same bed Robert and I had shared for nearly 3 decades. The bed where we'd held each other through good times and bad. The bed where, just that morning, he'd kissed my forehead and said, "Good morning, my love," before leaving for work. Room 614. A hotel room number. My husband. A restaurant bill for 2. A specific time and day. And suddenly, like a terrible puzzle coming together, everything from the past few months started making horrifying sense. The late nights at work that had become more frequent. The new cologne I'd never smelled before he'd said it was a free sample, but Robert never went to department stores. The expensive haircut with a younger, more modern style. The gym membership he'd gotten without mentioning it to me first. The way he'd started smiling at his phone and quickly putting it away whenever I walked into the room. The way he'd changed the password on his personal email, the one I'd always had access to for our entire marriage. The way he'd become distant, present in body but absent in spirit. I sat there on that bed, holding that receipt like it was a bomb that had just exploded my life. After 28 years of marriage, after raising a beautiful daughter together, after building what I thought was an unshakable foundation of trust and love, I was now certain that my husband was having an affair. But here's what I didn't know. Here's what I couldn't possibly have imagined as I sat there with tears streaming down my face, planning my next move. The real story, the truth behind those receipts, those mysterious meetings, those secret hotel rooms was so much more complicated than I could have ever guessed. Rain beginning. And by the time I discovered what was really happening, I would have invaded my husband's privacy, followed him to hotels, photographed him with another woman, consulted with divorce lawyers, and very nearly destroyed our marriage based on assumptions that turned out to be completely. This is the story of how fear can make you see betrayal where there's only sacrifice, how suspicion can make you see lies where there's only protection, and how the worst assumptions we make about the people we love can blind us to the truth that's been right in front of us all along. My name is Margaret Chen. I've been married for 28 years. And this is the story of how I almost lost everything because I forgot who my husband really was.
The investigation begins.
I didn't confront Robert right away. Some part of me, maybe the part that still hoped I was wrong, wanted to be absolutely sure before I accused him of destroying our marriage. So I did what many people in my situation might do. I started investigating my own husband. That night, after Robert fell asleep beside me snoring peacefully while I lay awake, my mind racing, I crept out of bed and went to the home office. I opened our shared laptop and logged into his credit card statements. My hands were trembling as I scrolled through the charges. And there they were, like breadcrumbs in a terrible fairy tale. 3 separate charges to Hotel Belmont over the past 2 months. Not just the restaurant, hotel rooms. Each one checked in for a few hours in the afternoon, then checked out. The same pattern, over and over again. September 15th, Hotel Belmont, room 402. 3 hours. October 3rd, Hotel Belmont, room 521. 2.5 hours. October 16th, Hotel Belmont, room 614. 3 hours. I sat there in the dark, the computer screen casting a blue glow on my face, and felt something inside me begin to break. These weren't business meetings. These weren't client lunches. These were, what? Affair meetings? Secret rendezvous? How does a woman process this? How do you look at 28 years of marriage and suddenly see it all as a lie? I checked his text messages next, or at least, I tried to. But every single conversation had been deleted. Every one except work-related messages and our family group chat with our daughter Emily. Robert had never deleted his messages before. In 28 years, he'd never once cleared his phone history. I tried to log into his personal email. The password didn't work. He'd changed it, without telling me, without any explanation. The email account we'd always shared, that I'd had access to since we first got email in the early 2000s, was suddenly locked to me. I went back to bed that night and lay there in the darkness, listening to my husband breathe. The man I'd loved for 3 decades. The father of my child. The person I'd trusted more than anyone in the world. And I wondered, who are you? When did you become a stranger? The next morning, I started keeping a journal. I know it sounds obsessive. Maybe it was. But I needed to document everything. I needed to see the pattern. I needed evidence that I wasn't going crazy, that my suspicions weren't just paranoid delusions. Journal entry, September 12th. Robert came home tonight wearing cologne I've never smelled before. When I asked about it, he said it was a free sample from the mall. But Robert hates shopping malls. He always has. He would never go there alone. Journal entry, September 18th. He mentioned joining a gym today. Casually, like it was no big deal. I asked which gym, and he got vague. Said he'd tell me the details later. He never did. Why would he hide something as simple as which gym he joined? Journal entry, September 24th. New haircut, much younger style than usual. I complimented it and asked if he had a special meeting at work. He said no, just felt like a change. But Robert has had the same haircut for 15 years. People don't just change their entire appearance without a reason. Journal entry, October 3rd. Heard him on the phone late at night in the garage. I woke up and he wasn't in bed. Found him outside, talking to someone. He was laughing, really laughing, in that soft, intimate way you laugh when you're talking to someone special. When I opened the door, he jumped and quickly hung up. Said it was a client. But I heard him say, "I'll see you soon," right before he noticed me. Journal entry, October 9th. Found the first hotel receipt. Hotel Belmont, room 614. My husband is having an affair. I know it now. I feel it in my bones. By mid-October, I'd lost 8 pounds in 3 weeks. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating properly. My coworkers at the office noticed something was wrong. "Margaret, are you feeling okay?" they'd ask. "You look exhausted. You seem distracted." But what could I tell them? How do you explain to casual work acquaintances that your entire life is falling apart, that you're watching your husband fall in love with someone else in real time, and you're powerless to stop it? Then came the morning that changed everything. It was a Tuesday. Robert and I were having breakfast together, something we'd done every morning for 28 years. Routine. Comfortable. Or at least it used to be. He was wearing one of those new expensive shirts. The cologne. His hair was carefully styled, not just combed. He checked his phone and smiled, actually smiled before catching himself and putting the phone face down on the table. I looked at him across the table. Really looked at him. And I realized I was looking at a stranger. This man who I'd woken up next to for 10,220 mornings. Who I'd shared coffee with, made plans with, dreamed with. I didn't know him anymore. "I have a client meeting today," he said, not meeting my eyes. "It's going to run late. Don't wait up for dinner." "What client?" I asked. Such a simple question, but the way he looked at me when I asked it. There was this flash of panic in his eyes before he recovered. "Henderson Medical," he said, his voice suddenly defensive. "The account I've been working on for months. You know this, Margaret." But I didn't know. And more importantly, the edge in his voice, that angry, caught tone, told me everything I needed to know. That's when I made my decision. I was going to follow him. I was going to get proof. I was going to see this other woman with my own eyes. And then I would decide what to do with my shattered marriage.
The surveillance.
The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called in sick to work. Me, Margaret Chen, who hadn't taken an unscheduled sick day in 12 years, who prided herself on reliability, on responsibility, on doing the right thing. But there I was, at 9:30 in the morning, sitting in my car 3 buildings down from Robert's office, a baseball cap pulled low over my face, dark sunglasses on even though it was overcast. I'd brought coffee in a thermos, granola bars, a book I couldn't focus on reading. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad movie. But I couldn't stop. I had to know. I had to see. At 11:47 a.m., Robert emerged from his office building. I'd been waiting for over 2 hours, and suddenly there he was. He paused outside the entrance, looked around, left, then right, then behind him. That's what got me. That furtive, careful checking. Like someone who knows they're doing something wrong. He got in his car, and I followed. Through downtown streets, past the business district, toward the waterfront where the nice hotels are. My hands were sweating so badly on the steering wheel that I had to wipe them on my jeans. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Part of me was screaming, "Turn around. Go home. Don't do this. You'll regret seeing whatever you're about to see." But I couldn't turn around. I had to know the truth. At 11:52 a.m., Robert pulled into the parking garage of Hotel Belmont. The same hotel. The same place from all those receipts. This was it. This was the moment. I parked in a spot where I could see the elevator entrance and took out my phone with shaking hands. I started recording video. Some part of my brain, the practical, lawyer part that my daughter Emily inherited from me, knew I might need evidence. For divorce proceedings. For custody. For something. At 11:53 a.m., she appeared. A woman. Young, maybe 30 years old, definitely younger than me. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing jeans and a sweater. Nothing fancy. Nothing sexy. And here's what struck me: she looked scared. Not excited. Not romantic. Not like someone meeting their lover for a secret rendezvous. She looked terrified. Like she was running from something. Her eyes kept darting around the parking garage, checking over her shoulder. Robert approached her near the elevators. They talked for maybe 30 seconds. He put his hand on her shoulder and I zoomed in with my phone, trying to capture their faces, but the resolution was terrible, grainy. I could just make out their serious expressions. Then they went into the elevator together. And the doors closed. And they were gone. I sat in that parking garage for 3 hours. 3 endless hours. The video on my phone had long since stopped recording. I just sat there, staring at the elevator doors, my mind creating terrible scenarios of what they were doing in that hotel room. Were they in bed together right now? Was Robert touching her the way he used to touch me? Was he telling her he loved her? Was he planning to leave me for her? I thought about our wedding day. About how Robert had cried when I walked down the aisle. About the promises we'd made to each other, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others. I thought about the day our daughter Emily was born. How Robert had held her with such tenderness and said, "I'm going to be the best father I can be. For you, Margaret, for our family." I thought about 28 years of, "I love you," and "good night," and "see you later," and "how was your day?" All those ordinary, beautiful moments that suddenly felt like lies. At 2:53 p.m., they emerged. The elevator doors opened, and Robert and the young woman walked out together. She was crying now, not trying to hide it, just openly crying. Robert handed her an envelope. It was thick, stuffed with something. Cash, I assumed. She took it, nodded, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and walked quickly toward a beat-up Honda Civic in the far corner of the garage. Robert watched her drive away, his expression. I couldn't read it. Sad? Worried? Guilty? Car engine starting, driving away. Then he went to his own car and drove back to his office, like it was just another normal workday. Like he hadn't just spent 3 hours in a hotel room with another woman. Like he hadn't just destroyed our marriage. Music becomes more intense, conflicted. I followed him back to the office and watched him go inside. Then I drove home. I don't remember the drive. I was on autopilot, my body going through the motions while my brain tried to process what I just witnessed. When I got home, I went straight to Robert's car still parked in the garage from the previous day. My hands were shaking as I opened the passenger door. I searched everywhere. Glove compartment, under the seats, in the back, and there, on the back seat, partially hidden under his gym bag, a woman's silk scarf. Burgundy with gold paisley. Expensive. Definitely not mine. I picked it up, brought it to my face, smelled it. Perfume. Young. Floral. Nothing like what I wore. I dropped it like it had burned me and kept searching. The gym bag. Inside workout clothes, shoes, protein shaker. And underneath, wrapped in a towel, a small blue jewelry box. I opened it with trembling fingers. Diamond earrings. Delicate. Beautiful. I checked the price tag still attached to the box, $1,200. Our anniversary had passed 2 months ago. Robert had given me a card and taken me to a casual dinner at our neighborhood Italian restaurant. My birthday wasn't for 3 more months. Who were these earrings for? That night, Robert came home at his normal time. He kissed my cheek like always. Asked how my day was like always. We ate dinner together, watched TV, went to bed, and I said nothing, because I didn't know what to say. How do you start that conversation? I followed you today and watched you meet your mistress at a hotel. I lay awake that entire night, staring at the ceiling, listening to my husband snore peacefully beside me, planning my next move, trying to figure out how to survive what was coming next. Because one thing was certain, I couldn't continue living this lie. Something had to break, and soon.
Part 3. The Family Conspiracy.
Before I confronted Robert directly, I decided to talk to his mother. Patricia Chen, 82 years old, sharp as a tack, with eyes that had always seemed to see through whatever facades people put up. If anyone knew what was really going on with Robert, it would be his mother. I drove to Patricia's house on a Saturday morning. She was in her front garden, tending to her roses, the same roses she'd been growing for 30 years. When she looked up and saw my face, she didn't seem surprised. There was no, "Oh, Margaret, what a lovely surprise." No cheerful greeting. Instead, she straightened up, pruning shears still in her gloved hand, and said, "He doesn't know you're here, does he?" Dash dash dash. Those were the first words out of Patricia's mouth. As if she'd been expecting me. As if she knew exactly why I'd come. My stomach dropped. "Can we talk inside?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She nodded, pulled off her gardening gloves, and led me into her house. We sat in her living room, a room I'd been in hundreds of times over the years for family gatherings, holidays, Sunday dinners. But today it felt different. Foreign. Like enemy territory. Patricia made tea with the formal precision she always used when something serious needed to be discussed. She sat across from me in her high-backed chair, and I suddenly felt like I was being interrogated, not consoled. "You found something," she said. Not a question. A statement. I showed her everything. The receipts I'd found in Robert's drawer. The credit card statements showing multiple hotel charges. The photos on my phone from the parking garage, grainy, but clearly showing Robert with that dark-haired woman. The scarf. The earrings. Patricia looked at each piece of evidence carefully, her expression unreadable. Then she set them down on the coffee table between us and looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes. "Your husband," she said slowly, "has always been good at keeping secrets." My hands tightened around my teacup. "What does that mean?" "Patricia, if you know something." Even as a child, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken, Robert had this ability to compartmentalize his life. To keep parts of it separate from other parts. To hold his cards close. "I don't want riddles," I said, my voice rising. "I want the truth. Is my husband having an affair?" Pause. Tension building. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "About 6 months ago, Robert started asking me strange questions." "What kind of questions?" "Questions about loyalty," she said. "About family obligations. About what we owe the people we love versus what we owe ourselves. About doing the right thing even when it looks like the wrong thing." About whether it's ever acceptable to keep secrets from the people you're supposed to be closest to. I wanted to throw my teacup across the room. What did you tell him? I told him that sometimes the right choice feels like the wrong one. And that secrets always have a cost. That whatever he was carrying, it was going to become heavier the longer he carried it alone. So you do know something, I said, standing up. You know what he's doing, and you're not going to tell me. Patricia stood too, meeting my eyes with surprising steel for an 82-year-old woman. Margaret, I know my son. I know he's principled to a fault. I know he keeps his promises even when it costs him everything. And I know that if he's keeping something from you, there's a reason that goes deeper than simple betrayal. That's not good enough, I said. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you, she replied. Because what Robert is dealing with isn't my secret to tell. It's his. And if I tell you what I suspect, you'll never trust your own judgment again. You'll never get the chance to truly know your husband. I left Patricia's house more confused and frustrated than when I'd arrived. She knew something. I was certain of it. But she was protecting Robert, just like everyone seemed to be protecting Robert except me. My next stop was my daughter, Emily. 26 years old, working at an upscale boutique downtown. She and I had always been close, or at least, I thought we had been. But lately, she'd been distant, evasive, always busy when I asked to meet up. When I walked into her boutique, her face went through a rapid series of expressions: surprise, then pleasure, then guilt. There it was, that flash of guilt that told me everything I needed to know. Mom, she said, setting down the flower arrangement she'd been working on. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you, I said. About your father. Her face closed down immediately. Mom, I'm at work. Can this wait? No, it can't wait. This is important, Emily. We went out to the alley behind the shop. It was narrow, cramped, smelling of restaurant garbage from the Thai place next door. Emily leaned against the brick wall, her arms crossed defensively. What about Dad? She asked, not meeting my eyes. You know something, I said. I can see it on your face, Emily. You've always been terrible at hiding things from me. What's going on with your father? Mom, please, she said, her voice cracking. Just stop investigating him, okay? Just stop. And there it was. Confirmation. My own daughter knew. Everyone in this family knew what was happening except me. Is there another woman? I demanded. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. Is he sick? Is something wrong with him? No, she whispered. It's not. It's not about him like that. Then what? I was almost shouting now. Emily, I'm your mother. Your father is destroying our marriage, and you're keeping his secrets? She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the dirty alley ground, her head in her hands. You're asking me to choose, she sobbed. You're asking me to choose between you and Dad, and I can't. I promised him. I promised. I sat down beside her, not caring about my clean pants getting dirty. Emily, sweetheart, please. I need to understand what's happening. She looked at me with those eyes so much like Robert's eyes and said something that made everything worse. The person Dad is protecting. She needs him. She really needs him. And Dad is the only one who can help her. She, a woman who needs my husband. A woman he's meeting in secret, giving money to, keeping hidden from me. Who is she? I whispered, but Emily just shook her head, stood up, and went back into the shop without another word. Sound effect door closing, leaving narrator alone. I drove home in a daze. Everyone knew. Patricia knew. Emily knew. And they were all protecting Robert, keeping his secrets, leaving me completely in the dark. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I searched Robert's car completely. Methodically, like a detective at a crime scene. The scarf was still there in the back seat. But now I found more. In his gym bag, those diamond earrings. In the glove compartment, receipts from 3 different hotels. In the trunk, hidden under the spare tire, a manila envelope containing what looked like legal documents. I pulled one out and read it. Restraining order application. Petitioner Sophie Chen. Sophie Chen. A name I'd never heard before. Who was Sophie Chen? And why did Robert have her legal documents in his car? I photographed everything with my phone. Every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence. I was building a case now. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I was building a case. That night at dinner, I watched Robert carefully. He ate his spaghetti, talked about his day, laughed at something on the news. He seemed normal, relaxed, not like a man carrying terrible secrets. Unless those secrets didn't feel terrible to him. Unless he'd convinced himself he was doing the right thing. Robert, I said carefully, can I ask you something? He looked up from his pasta. Of course. Are you happy? He blinked, surprised by the question. What? In our marriage. Are you happy? He set down his fork. Margaret, where is this coming from? Just answer the question. Are you happy with me? With our life together? He reached across the table and took my hand. Of course I am. Why would you even ask that? Because you seem different lately. Distant, like your mind is somewhere else. I've been busy at work, he said. The new contracts, you know. It's been stressful. I pulled my hand away. Right, work. He studied my face, and for a moment I thought he was going to tell me the truth. That he was going to confess everything. But instead he just said, is everything okay with you? Everything's fine, I lied. Just tired. We finished dinner in silence. And I thought, this is it. This is what the end of a marriage looks like. Not a dramatic fight or a tearful confrontation. Just two people sitting across from each other, both hiding the truth, both waiting for everything to explode. I didn't have to wait much longer.
Part 4. The confrontation.
I decided to wait until Robert came home from work to confront him. I spent the entire day preparing, not just emotionally, but practically. I laid everything out on our bed like a prosecutor preparing for trial. The receipts, the credit card statements printed in black and white, the scarf, that burgundy silk scarf that smelled like someone else, the blue jewelry box with those diamond earrings still inside, price tag mocking me. Screenshots from my phone showing the hotel charges. And the photos, grainy, but unmistakable, of Robert with that dark-haired woman. I arranged them carefully, chronologically, like evidence in a courtroom. Because that's what this was going to be, a trial. And I was going to be judge, jury, and prosecutor all at once. At 6:47 p.m., I heard Robert's car pull into the driveway. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. This was it. After weeks of suspicion, investigation, sleepless nights, this was the moment everything would finally break open. Footsteps approaching, keys in door. Margaret, he called out, coming into the house. I'm home. Sorry I'm a bit late, traffic was terrible. I'm upstairs, I called back, my voice surprisingly steady. In the bedroom. We need to talk. I heard him climbing the stairs. The same stairs he'd climbed thousands of times in our marriage. But today, everything was different. Today, he was walking toward the end of everything we'd built together. When Robert appeared in the bedroom doorway, he was smiling, that tired, end-of-workday smile I'd seen a million times. But then he saw the bed. Saw all the evidence laid out like an accusation. And the smile died on his face. The color literally drained from his face. I watched it happen. He went from his normal complexion to an ashen gray in about 3 seconds. Margaret, he started, his voice already defensive. No, I cut him off, surprised by how cold my voice sounded. You don't get to explain yet. You don't get to lie to me again. I want you to look at all of this. Really look at it. I picked up the first receipt. Hotel Belmont, September 15th, room 402. You told me you were working late that day. Remember? You said you had a project deadline. I picked up another. October 3rd, room 521. You told me you had a client dinner. I waited up for you. You came home smelling like cologne and said the client was demanding. Another receipt. October 16th, Room 614. You told me you had an all-day meeting. But you know what's interesting, Robert? Your credit card was charged for 3 hours. Not all day. 3 hours. In a hotel room. He tried to take a step into the room, his hands raised like he was approaching a dangerous animal. Please, Margaret, just listen. I'm done listening to your lies. The words exploded out of me. All the pain, all the betrayal, all the weeks of anguish compressed into that one shout. I saw Robert physically flinch. 28 years. My voice was shaking now, but I didn't care. 28 years I've given you. I supported your career when you wanted to switch jobs. I raised our daughter while you traveled for work. I made our house a home. I was faithful, Robert. Faithful. Every single day for 28 years. I held up my phone, showing him the video I'd taken in the parking garage. And this is what you do? Sneak around with some woman young enough to be your daughter? Buy her jewelry. I threw the earring box at him. It bounced off his chest and fell to the floor. While you give me a Hallmark card for our anniversary? Voice breaking. How long, Robert? How long has this been going on? Who is she? Does she know you have a wife? Does she know about me? Or am I just the old, boring woman you come home to while you have your exciting affair with her? Robert had moved into the room now, and he sat heavily on the edge of the bed right on top of some of the papers. His head was in his hands, his shoulders slumped in defeat. You have it all wrong, he said, his voice muffled. I laughed. It was a terrible sound. Bitter. Broken. I have it wrong? Then explain this to me, Robert. Make it make sense. Tell me a story where you're not cheating on me, because right now, that's the only story these facts tell. He looked up at me then, and I was shocked to see tears in his eyes. Real tears. Robert wasn't a crier. In 28 years, I'd seen him cry maybe 5 times at our wedding, when Emily was born, at his brother's funeral, and a couple of other major life moments. But now, tears were streaming down his face. That woman, he said, his voice breaking. The one in the video. Her name is Sophie, and she's not my mistress. He reached into his jacket pocket with trembling hands and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out to me. She's my niece. I snatched it from him, unfolded it, and read. Patient name Sophie Chen, age 24, relationship to emergency contact niece. Diagnosis physical abuse injuries, multiple contusions, fractured left wrist healed incorrectly, cigarette burns on forearms. Recommended emergency shelter placement, police report, protective services consultation. Niece? I whispered, reading and rereading the form. What niece? Robert, you don't have a niece. Derek didn't have children, did he? And that's when my husband began to tell me a story I never knew. A story about his brother Derek, who had died 8 years ago. A story about secrets and shame and a promise Robert had made at his brother's deathbed.
Part 5. The Truth Revealed.
Robert stood up and walked to the window, his back to me, as he began to explain. And with every word, my understanding of reality shifted. Derek got his girlfriend pregnant when they were 22, Robert said, his voice quiet. Linda Martinez. She wanted to keep the baby. Derek wanted to do the right thing, so they got married. They were kids, Margaret. Barely out of college, neither of them ready to be parents or spouses. The marriage lasted 8 months. The divorce was bitter. Linda's family was wealthy, connected. They had lawyers. Derek had student loans and hope. Linda got primary custody. Derek got supervised visits every other weekend, if Linda felt like allowing them. I sat down on the bed, still clutching that hospital form, trying to process this information. Derek had a daughter, I said slowly. All these years, and I never knew. None of us knew, Robert said, turning to face me. Derek was ashamed. He felt like he'd failed. Failed as a husband, failed as a father. Linda's family made sure Sophie grew up thinking her biological father had abandoned her. They poisoned her against him. By the time Sophie was 10, she refused to see Derek at all. But Derek never stopped trying, he continued. He paid child support religiously more than he was required to. He sent birthday cards that were never delivered. Christmas presents that Linda returned. He carried Sophie's picture in his wallet until the day he died. When Derek died, Sophie was 15. She didn't come to the funeral. We all assumed she didn't care. That Linda had succeeded in making Sophie hate him. But the truth, his voice broke. The truth was so much worse. I stood up and moved closer to him. For the first time since I'd started suspecting him, I was seeing my husband, really seeing him not as the enemy, but as someone carrying an enormous burden. What happened to Sophie? I asked quietly. Linda remarried when Sophie was 16. A man named Raymond Martinez. A judge, respected in the community, powerful, connected to every attorney and prosecutor in the city. And he was a monster, Margaret. He beat Sophie. He beat Linda. But because of who he was, because of his connections, every time Sophie tried to report it, the reports disappeared. Every time she went to a counselor, they sided with Raymond. He was a respected judge. Sophie was a troubled teenager. Who was going to believe her? I felt sick, physically sick. Oh my God. For 8 years, Sophie lived in hell, Robert continued. And she had no one. Her biological father was dead. Her mother was too terrified to leave. Raymond had eyes everywhere. He even hired a private investigator to follow Sophie, to make sure she wasn't talking to anyone. 6 months ago, Sophie tracked me down. She'd found Derek's old law firm through Google, told them she was his daughter, and they gave her my number. When she called me, I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number. But I did answer, and the first thing she said was, "Uncle Robert? You don't know me, but my father was Derek Chen. And he told me once that if I ever needed help, his family would protect me. I need help, please. I'm scared he's going to kill me." I sank back down onto the bed, the hospital form still in my hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because Sophie begged me not to tell anyone," Robert said, sitting beside me. She was convinced that Raymond had informants everywhere. That if word got back to him that she'd contacted family, that she was planning to leave, he would kill Linda to punish Sophie for talking. So the hotels I started were the only places Sophie agreed to meet. Neutral ground. She didn't want me coming to her house, too dangerous. She didn't want to come here. What if Raymond's investigator followed her and found out where I lived? So we met at hotels. Public lobbies. Safe. Anonymous. And the cash? I asked, remembering that thick envelope. For an apartment deposit. First month's rent. Security. Sophie needed to move out, but she had no money. Raymond controlled all the finances. Linda didn't even have access to their bank accounts. I've been helping Sophie save up to leave, to get her own place where he can't find her. The scarf? Sophie left it in my car after I drove her to a lawyer's appointment. She was so paranoid about being followed that she had me pick her up 3 blocks from her house, in an alley behind a grocery store. She was shaking so hard she could barely get in the car. Voice breaking with emotion. "And the earrings?" I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Robert actually laughed, a short, sad sound. "Those were for you. Your birthday is in December." Sophie helped me pick them out because, and I quote, "Uncle Robert, you have the taste of a man who thinks all jewelry looks the same. Let me help you before you buy Mom something hideous." Long pause, sound of rain intensifying. I looked at all the evidence spread across our bed. Every piece of it had a different meaning now. Not betrayal, protection, not an affair, a promise. The credit card charges, the changed passwords, the deleted texts. I said, all to protect Sophie. I paid cash whenever possible so there wouldn't be credit card trails. I changed my passwords because Sophie was worried that if Raymond somehow hacked into my accounts, he'd find her. I deleted texts because they contained information about her location, her plans, her lawyer's name. I was covering her tracks, Margaret. I was trying to keep her safe. And I ruined it, I whispered. Sophie saw me that day at the hotel. She panicked because she thought I was Raymond's investigator. Robert nodded. She called me, terrified. That's why she was crying when we came out. I had to calm her down, promise her that you didn't know anything, that her secret was still safe. But you knew I was there. You knew I'd followed you. And you said nothing. I was going to tell you that night, Robert said. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't watch our marriage fall apart because of my promise to Sophie. I was going to break my word to her if that's what it took to save us. But then I came home and saw. He gestured to the bed. And I realized I was already too late. That you'd already convicted me in your heart. I started crying then. Not the angry tears from before, but tears of shame and regret and relief all mixed together. I'm so sorry, I sobbed. Robert, I'm so sorry. I thought I was so sure that you. He pulled me into his arms, and for the first time in weeks, I let him hold me. I know what you thought, he said into my hair. And I understand why. I was sneaking around. I was lying about where I was going. I was distant and distracted and keeping secrets. If I were you, I would have thought the same thing. We sat there for a long time, holding each other, as Robert told me everything. About the domestic violence lawyer he'd found for Sophie. About the restraining order petition that was being filed. About helping Linda plan her own escape from Raymond. About the court date coming up in just a few days that would hopefully set them both free. Your mother knew, I said finally. And Emily. Mom figured it out about 3 months ago, Robert admitted. I was a mess, Margaret. I wasn't sleeping. I'd lost 15 pounds from stress. She confronted me, and I broke down and told her everything. She wanted me to tell you, but she understood why Sophie needed it to be secret. And Emily? Emily figured it out 6 weeks ago. She dropped by my office unannounced and saw Sophie leaving. Emily followed her. You know how protective she is, and confronted me. I made her promise not to tell you. I made our daughter lie to her mother, Margaret. I put her in an impossible position. She was protecting Sophie, I said. They both were. Everyone was protecting Sophie except me, because I didn't know she existed. I'm sorry, Robert said. I'm so sorry I put you through this. I'm sorry I made you doubt me. I'm sorry I almost destroyed our marriage because I was trying to keep a promise to my dead brother. I pulled back and looked at my husband. Really looked at him. And I saw what I should have seen all along: not a cheater, but a hero. Not a liar, but a protector. Not someone betraying his family, but someone honoring it in the deepest way possible. Show me everything, I said. All the legal documents. The texts from Sophie. The lawyer's information. The court date. I want to see the whole picture. Robert pulled out his phone and showed me months of correspondence. Late-night texts from Sophie. He was screaming at my mom tonight. I'm scared. Thank you for believing me. You're the only one who does. Uncle Derek was right. His family did protect me. I read through them all, my heart breaking with each one. This wasn't an affair. This was a young woman desperately reaching out to the only family she had left. And my husband had answered that call without hesitation, even knowing what it might cost him. When is the court date? I asked. Friday. 3 days from now. If the judge grants the restraining order, Sophie and Linda can finally be safe. They're filing for divorce the same day. Linda is moving in with Sophie. They're both getting out. I stood up and started gathering all the evidence from the bed. Then I'm coming with you. Soph.
Part 6. Sophie's story.
The next day, Robert and I went to meet Sophie properly. She lived in a tiny studio apartment on the east side, the place Robert had helped her rent with his affair money, as I thought of it. The building was old but clean, in a neighborhood that was safe enough. Sophie answered the door on the second knock. She was exactly as I'd seen her in my surveillance video, but smaller somehow. More fragile. She was thin, too thin, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Her arms were covered by a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm weather, hiding the scars Robert had told me about. "Hi," she said quietly, stepping aside to let us in. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You must be Aunt Margaret. Aunt Margaret. She'd called me Aunt Margaret without hesitation, as if I'd always been part of her life instead of a stranger who'd almost ruined everything. Hi, Sophie, I said, my own voice not much stronger than hers. I'm so sorry for everything. For following your uncle. For taking pictures. For almost exposing you. She shook her head quickly. No, you thought he was cheating. That makes sense. I would have thought the same thing. She looked at Robert with such affection and gratitude. Uncle Robert told me what happened. About the evidence you found. About how you were ready to protect yourself. That's good. That's smart. I wish my mom had been that smart years ago. Her apartment was small but neat. A few pieces of second-hand furniture. Some plants on the windowsill that she was clearly trying to keep alive. A framed photo on the small dining table that made my heart stop. It was a picture of Derek. Young Derek, maybe 25 years old, holding a baby girl. Both of them laughing at whoever was taking the photo. My dad, Sophie said, noticing me looking at it. That's the only picture I have of us together. I found it hidden in my mom's closet last year. She'd kept it all these years but never showed me. Raymond didn't know it existed. I walked over and picked up the frame carefully, studying Derek's face. I'd known Derek, of course. He'd been at our wedding. At Emily's christening. At dozens of family gatherings before his death. But I'd never known about this daughter. This whole other part of his life. Your father loved you, I told Sophie. Robert told me last night about how Derek never stopped trying to see you. How he paid child support beyond what was required. How he carried your picture in his wallet until the day he died. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know. I thought he abandoned us. That's what Mom told me. That's what Raymond told me. They said my dad didn't want me, that he'd moved on with his new family and forgotten about me. But last year, I found some papers in Mom's filing cabinet. Old court documents. I saw how hard my dad fought for custody. How many times he petitioned for more visitation rights. How he sent child support checks with notes attached, for Sophie's birthday. For Sophie's school supplies. For Sophie's future. Mom never told me about any of it. Robert sat down beside Sophie on her second-hand couch, and she immediately leaned into him, seeking comfort the way a daughter leans into a father. It was clear they'd developed a strong bond over these 6 months of secret meetings. Sophie, I said, sitting down in the chair across from them. Can I ask you something? Why did you reach out to Robert? After all these years of believing your family had abandoned you? Because things got really bad about a year ago, she said quietly. Raymond had always been controlling, but after I turned 24 and got a job at a restaurant, he became violent. He didn't want me having my own money. Didn't want me having independence. He broke my wrist when I said I wanted to move out. She pulled up her left sleeve, and I saw the wrist was slightly crooked, healed wrong. I told I fell. Raymond stood right there and backed up my story. Who were they going to believe? A respected judge or a clumsy girl? After that, I started looking for a way out. I Googled my father's name and found his obituary. It mentioned Robert and Patricia Chen as surviving family. I spent 3 months researching you guys. Looking at your social media. Trying to figure out if you were people I could trust. And Emily, she continued. I reached out to Emily first on Instagram. I wanted to talk to someone my own age. Someone who wouldn't immediately call the authorities and make everything worse. Emily was amazing. She listened. She believed me. And she told me that her dad, my Uncle Robert, was one of the good ones. That if I asked for help, he would help. I made a mental note to hug my daughter for about an hour the next time I saw her. So I called Uncle Robert, Sophie said. And the first thing he said was, Sophie? Derek's Sophie? Like he'd been waiting for me to call. Like he'd always known I existed even though I didn't know he did. Robert cleared his throat, his voice rough with emotion. Your father made me promise something before he died. He said, Robert, if Sophie ever reaches out, if she ever needs the family, you take care of her. You be there for her the way I couldn't be. I kept that promise, Sophie. I'll always keep it. Sophie started crying, then deep, wrenching sobs that shook her thin frame. Robert held her, and I moved to sit on her other side, and together we formed a protective circle around this young woman who'd been through so much. The court hearing is Friday, Robert said after Sophie's crying had quieted to sniffles. Your mom is filing for divorce the same day. We have a good lawyer. We have evidence. We have medical records. The judge, not Raymond, a different judge in a different district. She's known for being tough on domestic violence cases. What if he finds out beforehand? Sophie asked, the fear clear in her voice. What if his investigator is watching us right now? What if he hurts Mom before Friday? Your mom is staying with a friend, Robert said. Someone Raymond doesn't know about. She's told him she's visiting her sister in Ohio. She packed a bag, acted normal, and left 2 days ago. He thinks she's coming back next week. And you, I added, looking at Sophie. You're not alone anymore. You have Robert. You have Patricia. You have Emily. And you have me. We're your family, Sophie. We should have been there for you years ago, but we're here now. Sophie looked at me with those huge, sad eyes. You don't have to pretend to care about me just because I'm related to you. I know I've caused problems in your marriage. You haven't caused problems, I said firmly. Secrets caused problems. My assumptions caused problems. But you're a brave young woman who survived hell and found the courage to reach out for help. You're Derek's daughter. You're Robert's niece. And now you're my family too. That's not pretend, Sophie. That's real. We spent the rest of that afternoon together. Sophie showed us the documents her lawyer had prepared. We went through the testimony she'd need to give in court. We talked about what would happen after the restraining order, where Sophie and Linda would live, how they'd support themselves, what their new life might look like. As the sun started to set, painting Sophie's small apartment in golden light, I looked at this makeshift family we'd created. Robert, who'd kept a deathbed promise at enormous personal cost. Sophie, who'd survived years of abuse and still found the courage to hope. And me, who'd almost destroyed everything because I forgot how to trust. Friday, Sophie said as we were leaving. Friday, it ends. One way or another, it ends. It ends with you free, I told her. I promise you that, Sophie. Derek's family keeps its promises.
Part 7. The courtroom.
Friday morning arrived gray and overcast, as if the weather itself knew something significant was about to happen. Robert, Emily, Patricia, and I met Sophie and Linda at the courthouse at 8:30 a.m. The hearing was scheduled for 9:00. Footsteps echoing on marble. Linda Martinez looked like an older version of Sophie, the same dark hair, the same frightened eyes. She was in her early 50s but looked 10 years older, worn down by years of fear and abuse. When she saw Robert, she started crying. Thank you, she said, hugging him tightly. Thank you for helping my daughter when I couldn't. When I was too scared. Too weak. You're not weak, Robert told her gently. You're here now. That's what matters. Patricia, Robert's mother, had brought food because that's what Patricia did in every crisis. Homemade muffins that no one had the stomach to eat but that somehow made everyone feel better anyway. She sat with Linda and Sophie, 3 generations of women who'd survived different kinds of trauma. At 8:55, the bailiff called us in. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, not like the grand courtrooms on TV shows. Just a simple room with wooden benches, fluorescent lights, and the profound weight of justice hanging in the air. Sophie and her lawyer sat at one table. At the respondents' table sat Raymond Martinez and his attorney. This was the first time I'd seen him in person, and I was struck by how normal he looked. Distinguished, even, silver hair, expensive suit, confident posture. He looked like someone's kindly grandfather, not a monster who'd terrorized his family for years. That's the thing about abusers, I realized. They don't look like monsters. They look like respectable people. That's how they get away with it for so long. The judge entered. Judge Patricia O'Brien, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. She'd been briefed on the case and looked at Raymond Martinez with barely concealed disgust. "This court is now in session," she said. "We're here for a petition for a restraining order. Ms. Chen, you may proceed with your testimony." Sophie stood on shaking legs and walked to the witness stand. I watched her hands tremble as she was sworn in. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Sophie whispered. Her lawyer, a woman named Rebecca Chen, no relation, approached the stand. "Ms. Chen, can you please tell the court about your relationship with the respondent, Raymond Martinez?" And Sophie began to speak. At first, her voice was so quiet, the judge had to ask her to speak up. But as she continued, as she told her story, her voice grew stronger. She testified about the first time Raymond hit her when she was 16, for coming home past curfew. About the escalating violence over the years. About the broken wrist he'd caused. About the cigarette burns he'd inflicted when she tried to apply to college without his permission. She presented photographs, dozens of them, taken over years. Bruises in various stages of healing. Burns. The crooked wrist. Her lawyer presented medical records from multiple visits, each one with Sophie's lie: "I fell. I'm clumsy. I walked into a door." But the most damning evidence was a recording. Sophie had started recording Raymond on her phone 6 months ago, just audio, captured when her phone was in her pocket or her purse. Raymond's voice came through the speakers, cold and menacing. "If you ever tell anyone about this, I will make sure your mother has an accident. Do you understand me, Sophie? A fatal accident. And everyone will believe it was just a tragedy because I'm a respected judge and you're a nobody." The courtroom went silent. Even Raymond's lawyer looked uncomfortable. When it was the defense's turn to cross-examine, Raymond's lawyer tried to be gentle but persistent. "Ms. Chen, isn't it true that you had a difficult relationship with your stepfather because you resented him replacing your biological father?" Sophie's voice was steady now. "I resented him beating my mother. I resented him beating me. That has nothing to do with my biological father. But your biological father abandoned you when you were a baby. Isn't it possible you're projecting anger about that abandonment onto Mr. Martinez?" "My biological father didn't abandon me," Sophie said clearly. "He fought for custody and lost. He paid child support beyond what was required. He tried to see me every chance he got. My mother and Raymond kept us apart by lying to me about who my father really was. And when my father died, I wasn't allowed to say goodbye to him." She turned to look directly at Raymond, who had maintained a benign expression throughout the hearing. "But my father did one thing for me before he died. He made his family promise to protect me if I ever needed it. And they kept that promise. That man," she pointed at Robert, "kept his dead brother's promise at great personal cost. That's what a real father figure does. That's what real family does. You," she said to Raymond, her voice cold, "taught me what a monster in a suit looks like. But my Uncle Robert taught me what real courage looks like. What real love looks like. And now everyone in this courtroom knows the difference between the two of you." Raymond's mask finally slipped. His face flushed red with rage, and he started to stand, but his lawyer pulled him back down, whispering urgently in his ear. Judge O'Brien had been taking notes throughout. Now she set down her pen and looked at Raymond with contempt. "Mr. Martinez," she said, her voice cutting. "You are a sitting judge in this county. You've served on the bench for 20 years. Your colleagues speak highly of you. Your reputation, until this moment, was spotless. Which makes your conduct all the more reprehensible. You used your position, your connections, and your knowledge of the legal system to terrorize your stepdaughter and your wife. You silenced victims by exploiting your power. You are not just an abuser, Mr. Martinez. You are a disgrace to the bench and to the justice system you swore to uphold." Restraining order granted. "Mr. Martinez, you are to have no contact, direct or indirect, with the petitioner or her mother. You are to vacate the family home within 72 hours. You will surrender any weapons to the police department by end of business today. And I am referring this matter to the State Bar Association for disciplinary proceedings that will, if there is any justice, result in your disbarment." Sophie's legs gave out. She actually collapsed back into her chair, sobbing not from fear this time, but from relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. Linda rushed to her daughter, and they held each other, crying together. Raymond Martinez's face had gone from red to purple. He stood abruptly, pointing at Sophie. "This is ridiculous. She's lying. She's always been a troubled girl, making up stories for attention." "Mr. Martinez," Judge O'Brien cut him off sharply. "You will sit down and remain silent, or I will hold you in contempt. Your lawyer will speak for you from this point forward." Raymond's attorney looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Your Honor, we intend to appeal this decision." "You may certainly file an appeal," the judge said coldly. "But the restraining order takes effect immediately. Bailiff, please ensure Mr. Martinez understands the terms of this order before he leaves the courthouse." As we filed out of the courtroom, I looked back at Raymond Martinez. He was sitting alone at his table, his lawyer packing up papers with obvious distaste. Raymond's hands were shaking with rage or fear, I couldn't tell. But for the first time, he looked small, powerless, like the bully he'd always been, exposed in the light. Outside the courtroom, our makeshift family stood in a circle. Sophie was still crying, but smiling through her tears. Linda looked like she'd aged backwards 10 years in the span of an hour. Patricia was distributing muffins that everyone was suddenly hungry enough to eat. Emily had her arm around Sophie's shoulders. Robert had his arm around me. "It's over," Sophie kept saying, like she couldn't quite believe it. "It's really over. He can't hurt us anymore." "It's over," Linda confirmed, hugging her daughter tightly. "We're free, baby. We're finally free." We walked out of that courthouse together into the gray morning, but somehow, despite the clouds, everything seemed brighter. Sophie walked between Robert and Linda, holding both their hands like a child. Emily and I followed behind with Patricia. "You know," Patricia said to me quietly as we walked, "I'm proud of you, Margaret." "Proud of me?" I was surprised. I almost ruined everything. I didn't trust my own husband. But when you learned the truth, you didn't let pride stop you from admitting you were wrong. You came here today. You stood with Sophie. That takes courage too. She was right, I realized. It had taken courage to let go of my anger, to admit I'd been wrong, to stand beside my husband instead of against him. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is admit you made a mistake and choose to do better.
Healing and redemption.
The weeks following the court hearing were about rebuilding not just Sophie and Linda's lives, but my marriage to Robert as well. Because while the truth had set us free, the damage of those weeks of suspicion and secrecy didn't heal overnight. Sophie and Linda moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town, far from Raymond, far from the house that held so many terrible memories. Robert and I helped them move, along with Emily and Patricia. We turned it into a family event, painting walls, assembling furniture from IKEA, hanging curtains. I remember one moment particularly clearly. It was about a week after the hearing. I was in Sophie and Linda's new kitchen, organizing dishes, when Sophie came up behind me. "Aunt Margaret," she said tentatively, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Are you and Uncle Robert okay? I know I caused problems between you. I know you thought he was..." She couldn't finish the sentence. I turned to face her, this brave young woman who'd survived so much and was still worrying about other people. "Sophie, you didn't cause problems. You needed help, and Robert gave it to you. The problems in my marriage were because I forgot something important." "What's that?" "I forgot who my husband was. I let fear make me suspicious. I let evidence tell me a story instead of trusting the man I'd known for 28 years. That's on me, not on you. But here's what I learned: Robert is exactly who I always thought he was. He's loyal. He's protective. He keeps his promises even when it costs him everything. The only thing that changed was my faith in him. And I'm working every day to rebuild that faith. Sophie hugged me then, and I realized that this young woman, my husband's niece, my daughter's cousin, had become family to me not just by blood, but by choice. Robert and I started going to couples therapy. I know it sounds dramatic, but we both agreed that we needed help processing what had happened and preventing it from happening again. Our therapist, Drive Morrison, was a kind woman in her 60s who asked us hard questions. "Margaret," she said in one session, "what made you immediately jump to the conclusion of infidelity rather than considering other explanations?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. "Fear," I finally said. "Fear of being replaced. Fear of getting old and boring. Fear that after 28 years, Robert might want something new. Someone younger. Someone more exciting." And Robert, Drive Morrison, turned to my husband. "Why didn't you trust Margaret enough to tell her the truth about Sophie?" Robert's answer was just as painful. "Because I was ashamed. Ashamed that my brother's daughter had been suffering for years and I didn't know. Ashamed that I'd failed Derek. And I was afraid that if I told Margaret, she'd want to get involved, maybe call the police herself, and Sophie had specifically said no one else could know. I chose Sophie's safety over Margaret's feelings. Both of you, Drive Morrison said gently, acted out of fear. Margaret, you feared losing Robert. Robert, you feared failing Sophie. But neither of you communicated those fears to each other. That's where the breakdown happened." She was right. Over the following weeks, Robert and I learned to talk to each other again, really talk. Not just exchange information about schedules and bills, but about feelings and fears and needs. One night, about a month after the court hearing, Robert and I sat on our back porch with glasses of wine, watching the sunset. It had become our ritual, a time to check in with each other, to talk about our day, to reconnect. "Margaret," Robert said, "I need to apologize again. For everything I put you through." "Robert, we've been over this." "No, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I've been thinking about how I would have felt if the situation were reversed. If you had been sneaking around, changing passwords, deleting messages, meeting someone at hotels. I would have lost my mind. I would have assumed the worst too. The fact that you're still here, that you chose to believe me. When I finally told you the truth, that you stood beside Sophie in that courtroom, Margaret, that's not just forgiveness. That's love, real love, the kind that survives mistakes and misunderstandings." I reached over and took his hand. "I love you, Robert. I never stopped loving you, even when I thought you were. When I thought the worst. And that's what scared me most. The idea that I could love you so much and still lose you." "You're never going to lose me," he said firmly. "But I am going to be more honest with you. About everything. Even when it's hard. Even when I'm scared. No more secrets." "No more secrets," I agreed. Meanwhile, Sophie was thriving. She'd enrolled in culinary school, something she'd always wanted to do but Raymond had forbidden. She'd found a part-time job at a local cafe to support herself while studying. She was making friends, going to therapy, learning what normal life looked like. Linda, too, was transforming before our eyes. She'd filed for divorce from Raymond, who was fighting it every step of the way despite the restraining order. She'd started classes to become a counselor specializing in domestic violence, wanting to use her experience to help other women. 3 months after the court hearing, we had a family dinner at our house. Robert and me, Emily and her new boyfriend, Patricia, Sophie and Linda. 7 people around our dining room table, passing dishes, laughing, telling stories. "Uncle Robert," Sophie said at one point, raising her glass of lemonade, "I want to make a toast." Everyone quieted down and raised their glasses. 6 months ago, Sophie said, her voice shaking slightly, I was trapped in a nightmare with no way out. I was scared all the time. I thought I was going to die in that house, either from Raymond killing me or from giving up and killing myself. Linda squeezed her daughter's hand, tears already flowing. But then I remembered something my biological dad, Derek, told me when I was little. Before Mom and Raymond poisoned me against him. He said, "Sophie, if you're ever in trouble, if you ever need help, my family will protect you. Always." And he was right. Uncle Robert, you kept my father's promise. You risked your marriage, your peace of mind, your sleep, everything to help me. Aunt Margaret, when you learned the truth, you could have been angry with me for causing problems. Instead, you stood with me in court. Emily, you believed me before anyone else did. Grandma Pat, you welcomed me like I'd always been part of the family. And Mom, she turned to Linda, you found the courage to leave. To choose me over fear. This family, her voice broke, this family saved my life. Literally. So my toast is this to family. Not just the one we're born into, but the one we choose. The one that shows up when we need them. The one that keeps promises even when it's hard. To family, we all echoed. I looked around that table at the faces of the people I loved. Robert, who'd kept a deathbed promise at enormous personal cost. Emily, who'd been caught between parents and chose compassion. Patricia, who'd raised a son with such strong moral character. Linda, who'd found courage after years of fear. And Sophie, brave, broken, healing Sophie, who'd survived hell and come out the other side. And I thought about how close I'd come to destroying all of this because I forgot to trust. Because I let fear override faith. Because I saw hotel receipts and assumed betrayal instead of asking questions. A month later, Robert surprised me with a weekend trip to the coast, just the two of us. We stayed at a small bed and breakfast, walked on the beach, talked for hours. It felt like we were dating again, rediscovering each other. On our last evening there, as we sat watching the sunset over the ocean, Robert pulled out a small box. "It's not what you think," he said quickly, seeing my expression. "You already have a wedding ring." Inside was a simple silver bracelet with an inscription, "Trust and Truth." "I had it made," Robert explained. "As a reminder. For both of us. Trust and truth, those are the foundations of everything we have. I promise to always give you truth, even when it's hard. And I'm asking you to trust me with your fears, your doubts, your worries. So we never go through something like this again." I let him clasp the bracelet around my wrist, and I cried, but they were good tears. Healing tears. The kind that wash away old pain and make room for new growth. "Trust and truth," I repeated. "I promise, Robert, both ways. Always." 6 months after the court hearing, we gathered again, this time for Sophie's culinary school graduation. She walked across that stage to receive her diploma, and we all cheered like she'd won an Olympic medal. Because in a way, she had won. She'd won her freedom, her future, her life. After the ceremony, Sophie pulled me aside. "Aunt Margaret, I need to tell you something," she said. "You know how you apologized to me for almost ruining everything? For not trusting Uncle Robert?" "Yes," I said, wondering where this was going. "I'm glad you doubted him." I blinked, shock.
So that's my story. The story of the receipt that almost ended my marriage. The story of how fear can make you see betrayal where there's only sacrifice. The story of how assumptions can blind you to truth. Music reflective, wise, full circle back to opening theme. But it's also the story of redemption, of healing, of learning that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every single day, even when things are hard, especially when things are hard. Today, 5 years after that terrible afternoon when I found the first receipt, my life looks very different. Robert and I celebrated our 33rd anniversary last month. We're not perfect. We still have disagreements. We still have to work at communication. But we've built something stronger than before, a marriage based not just on love, but on conscious daily choice. Sophie is running a successful catering business now. She specializes in helping other women who are leaving abusive situations, offering them free catering for their Fresh Start celebrations, hiring them when they need work, being the support system she wishes she'd had. Her father, Derek, would be so proud of her. Linda is now a full-time domestic violence counselor. She speaks at schools, at community centers, at churches. She tells her story to help other women recognize the signs she missed for too long. She turns her pain into power for others. Emily got married last year to a wonderful man who treats her with respect and kindness. At the wedding, Sophie was a bridesmaid, standing alongside Emily's childhood friends. It was beautiful to see them together, cousins who'd found each other through tragedy and become true sisters. Patricia, Robert's mother, passed away 2 years ago at the age of 84. In her final days, she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "Margaret, I knew Robert was innocent all along, but I also knew you needed to find your way to that truth yourself. If I'd told you, you would have believed me but doubted yourself. This way, you discovered who your husband truly is. That discovery that's worth more than my words ever could have been." She was right. I had to walk through that fire to truly understand what I had. If you're listening to this story and you're going through something similar, if you found receipts or texts or evidence that suggests betrayal, I want to tell you something important. Trust your instincts. Investigate if you need to. Protect yourself. But also remember, this evidence can be misleading. Circumstances can be deceiving. Before you burn down everything you've built, ask questions. Give the person you love a chance to explain. Because sometimes the worst thing you can imagine is the furthest thing from the truth. Sometimes the person you think is betraying you is actually being a hero. Sometimes the secrets they're keeping are to protect others, not to hurt you. But here's the key: real trust isn't blind. Real trust asks questions. Real trust demands honesty. Real trust says, "I love you, but I need the truth." And real love provides that truth, even when it's complicated. Robert and I now volunteer together at a local organization that helps families in crisis. We mentor couples who are struggling with trust issues. We share our story, the whole messy, complicated story, to help others understand that marriage is work. That trust is built daily. That love is a verb, not just a noun. Sophie often joins us at these sessions. She shares her perspective as the other woman who wasn't actually the other woman at all. She helps people understand that sometimes the people we love are carrying burdens we can't see. And that compassion, real compassion, means trying to understand before we condemn. Last week, Robert and I went back to Hotel Belmont, not to relive the nightmare, but to rewrite the memory. We had lunch at the restaurant, the same one from that first receipt. We ordered 2 entrees and an expensive bottle of wine. And we laughed about how I'd thought those receipts meant the end of our marriage when they actually represented one of Robert's finest moments. "You know," Robert said, raising his glass. "In a weird way, I'm glad you found those receipts." "What?" I nearly choked on my wine. "Why?" "Because it forced us to be honest with each other in a way we hadn't been in years. It showed me that you still cared enough to fight for our marriage. And it taught both of us that we can survive anything, even our worst fears, if we choose to face them together." He was right. We'd survived the worst-case scenario, or what I thought was the worst-case scenario, and come out stronger. We'd faced secrets and lies and assumptions and fear, and we'd chosen each other anyway. So if you're listening to this story and wondering what the lesson is, here it is: love the people in your life fiercely, but don't love them blindly. Demand honesty, but be willing to hear complicated truths. Protect yourself, but don't let fear make you cruel. And most importantly, remember that the people you love are human. They make mistakes. They keep secrets sometimes for reasons that have nothing to do with betrayal. They're imperfect and messy and complicated, just like you, just like me, just like all of us. My name is Margaret Chen. I've been married for 33 years. I found hotel receipts in my husband's drawer and thought my world was ending. But it turns out it wasn't ending. It was transforming. It was being tested and strengthened and remade into something better than it was before. And that receipt, that terrible, wonderful receipt that started it all, I still have it. I keep it in a small box in my dresser. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a reminder of growth, of lessons learned, of trust broken and rebuilt stronger than before. Because sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the most important ones. the moments that teach us who we really are and who the people we love really are. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if it made you think, if it helped you in any way, leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me about your own experiences with trust and truth and the complicated nature of love. And remember, behind every secret, there's a story. And sometimes not always, but sometimes that story will surprise you in the most beautiful way. Final words, soft and sincere. Take care of each other. Trust wisely. Love deeply. And never forget that the truth, no matter how complicated, is always worth pursuing. Until next time, this is Margaret Chen, reminding you that love is a choice. Make it consciously. Make it daily. Make it with your whole heart.